The first sign of trouble arrived in a pastel envelope, thick, perfumed, and laced with glitter. I found it wedged awkwardly between my water bill and a hardware catalog. Curious, I tore it open and scanned the gold embossed script. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Brittany Dillard and Chaz Montgomery," it read. "To be held at the Maplewood Meadows Clubhouse. A private pre-ceremony cocktail hour will be hosted poolside. Kindly refrain from using the pool on June 24th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. for guest enjoyment. Warmest regards, Karen Dillard, HOA President." I read it twice, then a third time. There had to be a mistake. The pool mentioned in the invitation wasn't the HOA's. It wasn't some public amenity or community project. It was mine, fully fenced, entirely on my property line, and built 5 years ago with cash from my own pocket. I maintained it, cleaned it, insured it. It was as private as a bedroom. So, why the hell was it being listed as a wedding venue? I drove straight to the HOA office, a modest converted garden shed parked beside the tennis courts. I didn't even knock. Karen Dillard looked up from her laptop with a tight-lipped smile. Her platinum bob didn't move an inch. She wore her usual pastel blazer, lavender this time, with a pearl brooch and matching nails. Always perfectly pressed. Always too calm. "Well, good morning, Mark. You got your invitation?" "Yeah," I said, voice clipped. "And I'd like to know who gave you permission to use my backyard pool for your daughter's wedding." Karen's expression didn't shift. "It's just for a few hours, darling. You don't use it much, and it's perfect for the photographs. The lighting back there, chef's kiss." "It's not about lighting," I said, stepping closer. "It's about boundaries. That pool is on my land. I didn't agree to any of this." She let out a soft, rehearsed laugh. "Oh, you signed the Community Harmony Clause when you moved in. Section 6B clearly states that homeowner amenities can be temporarily designated for communal use if they support neighborhood engagement or special events. I signed that 10 years ago, before you turned this place into a dictatorship." "Mark," she said, sighing like a patient schoolteacher, "this is Brittany's wedding. It's one day. Surely you can be neighborly." Neighborly is asking before planning a catered cocktail hour in someone else's yard. "You're being unreasonable," she snapped, the mask slipping for a second. "Do you really want to be the man who ruined a young bride's special day?" My silence was answer enough. "Fine," she huffed, rising from her chair. "Then we'll consider this a formal HOA directive. You'll receive documentation by the end of the week. And just so we're clear, any interference with wedding plans will result in fines. Hefty ones." I left without another word, heart pounding with disbelief. Outside, the manicured paths of Maplewood Meadows seemed to stretch endlessly, too tidy, too quiet. This neighborhood used to be a retirement dream, a peaceful place to enjoy my late wife's garden and the grandkids' summer visits. Then Karen got elected president. At first, it was small things. A citation for a flagpole being half an inch too tall. A strongly worded letter about non-regulation wind chimes. But over time, she amassed power like a small-town mayor. Fines flew like confetti, paint colors had to be approved for community tone, and last year, she nearly banned Halloween decorations for being seasonally aggressive. Now she wanted my pool. Back at home, I stood at the edge of the water, staring at the blue-tiled bottom glinting in the sunlight. My wife had loved this pool. It reminded her of the ocean. I built it after she passed, a way to keep her close, something calming amid the grief. The idea that Karen could just take it, commandeer it for her daughter's Pinterest-perfect wedding, was infuriating. But worse than the trespass was the assumption that I'd roll over and let her. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew this. Karen Dillard had picked the wrong neighbor, and I was about to show her just how unreasonable I could be. Word spread fast. By the next morning, I wasn't just the neighborhood curmudgeon. I was the villain in Karen Dillard's fairy tale. Her version of events, already posted in the Maplewood Meadows Facebook group, painted me as a selfish recluse denying a blushing bride her dream day. "We're heartbroken that one neighbor refuses to participate in the spirit of community," she wrote. but we will move forward with grace. Love always wins. The comment section exploded. Isn't he the guy who never shows up to block parties? How hard is it to let them use the pool for one day? Karen's done so much for this neighborhood. I wasn't surprised. Karen had curated her reputation like a Pinterest board. Charming, generous, eternally polished. Most folks here either adored her or feared her enough to nod politely and keep their heads down. I wasn't one of them. That afternoon, the landscapers showed up. 3 men rolled in with wheelbarrows stacked with white roses, folding chairs, and a wrought iron archway wrapped in faux ivy. I stepped out onto my porch before they'd even unloaded the second truck. "Who told you to be here?" I asked. One of them, tall, sunburned, clearly just doing his job, fished a printed email from his pocket. Karen's name was right at the top, complete with HOA letterhead. She said the HOA approved light decor for the pre-ceremony photos. Said you were informed. She lied, I said flatly. That pool is on my private property. If you so much as set 1 foot inside that fence, I'll call the sheriff. The men exchanged glances, shrugged, and packed up without protest. But I knew this was only a preview. Sure enough, later that evening, I got an official notice slipped under my door. It was printed on thick cardstock and filled with enough legalese to make a lawyer dizzy. At the bottom, Karen had signed in her signature loopy cursive. Noncompliance with HOA Section 6B will result in a $500 daily fine, beginning June 23rd. I slammed the paper down on the kitchen counter. My hand hovered over the phone, tempted to call my attorney but stopped. This wasn't about legal fees. This wasn't even about money. This was about principle. I poured myself a drink, stepped onto the back patio, and sat at the edge of the pool. The water was still, smooth as glass, reflecting the dusky sky. My grandkids had splashed here last summer. They'd launched cannonballs, practiced handstands, played mermaids and pirates. That laughter still echoed in my mind. No one was going to use this place for some champagne-fueled Vanity Fair just because Karen said so. I needed a plan. Retaliating with more bureaucracy was useless. Karen had buried herself in bylaws and subclauses. Beating her at her own game would take weeks of hearings and appeals. But there was another option, something that didn't involve rules, paperwork, or polite phone calls. Something creative. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken earlier that day at the grocery store. It was ridiculous, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A mountain of gelatin boxes. Strawberry red. Buy one, get one. That night, I stayed up until 3, scribbling calculations on the back of a pizza box. Water to gelatin ratios, cooling time, storage logistics. I looked up bulk food suppliers, industrial coolers, submersible pumps. I even Googled how to suspend objects in Jello. By dawn, the plan was formed, utterly absurd and perfectly legal. Not an ounce of vandalism, not a single trespass. But the message would be loud and clear. Karen wanted spectacle? I'd give her one. The next day, I made a few quiet calls. A local artist named Sergio, known for wild culinary installations, agreed to help, mostly out of morbid curiosity. "This is either genius or completely unhinged," he said over the phone. "But I'm in." By that evening, my garage was filled with pallets of gelatin mix and 3 industrial mixing drums I'd rented from a catering supply warehouse. I spent the next 2 days preparing while Karen paraded around town with her clipboard, smiling for the neighbors, flashing her daughter's engagement ring to anyone within eyesight. She thought she'd won, but she hadn't seen what I had in store. By the time the wedding day arrived, the pool would be off limits, all right, but not because of me. Because of 9,000 gallons of strawberry Jello. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. While the neighborhood tucked into bed, lulled by thoughts of pastel dresses and champagne flutes, I stood at the edge of my property, ankle-deep in logistical chaos. Sergio's crew worked like caffeinated ants, mixing, pouring, cooling, taking shifts beside the industrial drums, their arms red from constant stirring. Generators hummed like a mechanical lullaby under the moonlight. We drained the pool earlier using submersible pumps, careful to preserve the structure. Then, under Sergio's guidance, we laid a custom-fitted thermal liner along the bottom and walls, reinforced with a food-safe, heat-resistant barrier. It looked like the inside of a baking tray the size of a tennis court. Now came the real magic. We began to fill it. Gallon after gallon, the ruby-red liquid sloshed into place, steaming under the cool air. It smelled like a childhood summer, sickly sweet and slightly artificial. Sergio had added edible glitter to catch the light, and beneath the surface, dozens of suspended plastic roses floated like ghostly garden sprites. It was ridiculous. It was theatrical. It was perfect. By dawn, the transformation was complete. My backyard pool had become a colossal, quivering monument to petty resistance, a shimmering, surreal sea of strawberry jello. Sergio stepped back and whistled. I gotta be honest, man, this might be the weirdest commission I've ever done.
It's not weird, I said.
It's a boundary. He nodded. A sticky one. The wedding setup began around 9 a.m., and I made sure to stay inside, sipping coffee by the window as the show unfolded. Folding chairs were arranged near the community clubhouse, strings of fairy lights twisted up white lattice columns. A white tent was erected near the property line, just close enough to be suggestive, not quite enough to trespass. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Karen marched up my driveway in heels too thin for the grass. I met her at the edge of the property, arms folded, calm as a judge. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the pool. What is that? It's a gelatin installation, I said, deadpan. Didn't you read the HOA newsletter? Community harmony through creative expression. She blinked rapidly, mouth twitching. You turned your pool into a dessert? Technically, yes. And since no one but me has the right to access it, it's my dessert. She stepped closer, heels stabbing the turf. You need to drain it.
Now.
Karen, I said evenly, if I drained it now, the liner would melt, and I'd have to replace the entire pool. And that would be very expensive. I wouldn't want to invoice the HOA. You're obstructing a sanctioned event. No, you're attempting to use private property for personal gain. And you're welcome to explain that to the sheriff if you'd like. I've got the property line survey, permits, and receipts ready. She opened her mouth, closed it, then hissed. You'll regret this. Doubt it. She stormed off in a cloud of perfume and indignation. By noon, the wedding guests had arrived, dressed to the nines, wandering around the neighborhood with cocktails in plastic flutes, searching for the picturesque backdrop they'd been promised. A few drifted toward the fence, drawn by the unnatural shimmer. That's when the murmurs started. They stared at the wobbling red lake, unsure whether to laugh or gawk. Someone asked if it was real. A teenager tossed a pebble, and it bounced boing, before sinking slowly, leaving a rippling crater. Children begged to touch it. One girl screamed with delight when she dipped her fingers in and licked the gelatin off. Karen tried to redirect attention back to the ceremony, but the damage was done. The absurdity of it all was magnetic. Phones came out. Photos were taken. Hashtags were invented. Hashtag Jello Justice. Hashtag Poolside Petty. Hashtag Strawberry Stand. By the time the ceremony began, half the guests were buzzing about the performance art happening just across the fence. The bride, Brittany, tried to smile through it, but her eyes kept darting toward the crowd trickling away from her champagne table to peek at the wiggling red spectacle behind them. As she and Chaz exchanged vows, the air was thick not with romance, but giggles. Someone actually applauded the Jello during the ring exchange. Karen's face was carved from stone. And me? I just sat in a lawn chair with my lemonade, soaking it all in. The message had been received. Loud and jiggly. The wedding limped along, though not in the way Karen had envisioned. While the chairs remained upright and the couple technically said, I do, the spectacle that followed became an internet phenomenon before the bouquet even landed. By 3 p.m., photos of the gelatin pool had gone viral. A drone shot taken by some teenage cousin captured the entire ruby red mass shimmering under the sun, sparkling with floating plastic roses and perfectly sculpted edges. The caption read, HOA war escalates into dessert display. America, Please watch this. And TikTok did what TikTok does. I didn't need to gloat, social media did it for me. Within hours, strangers were chiming in from across the country. This is petty perfection. Why don't we fund this man's next project? When you're right and creative at the same time. Karen tried to spin it. She posted a passive-aggressive thank you in the neighborhood group. Though some people tried to distract from a sacred moment, love triumphed. Thank you all who came and supported Brittany and Chaz. But everyone could see her grip slipping. 2 days later, I received a formal apology, not from Karen, but from the HOA board president, Dale Thompson, a graying accountant with sweat stains and a fear of conflict. He showed up at my front door with his hat quite literally in hand. "We had no idea she'd gone this far," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "She overstepped. Big time." "Why didn't anyone stop her?" I asked.
He sighed.
"Because she is the board." Or she was. Technically, we've called an emergency vote. She's being removed as chairwoman. I blinked. "You're kidding." "Nope. We found out she'd sent those letters on official HOA letterhead without approval. You'd think we were a government agency, the way she acted." "And the fines?" "Forgiven. Stricken from the record. We even voted to formally acknowledge your creative protest as a protected form of expression under the neighborhood bylaws." I nearly laughed. "You're making Jello a form of free speech?" "Well, not in so many words. But yes." He scratched his head awkwardly. "And between you and me, my grandkids can't stop talking about it. They think you're a genius." I didn't say anything right away. Just nodded, let the silence fill the porch like a warm breeze. Then finally asked, "What happens to Karen?" Dale's eyes flicked down the street. "She's moving." Apparently, Brittany and Chaz didn't appreciate having their wedding hijacked by her turf war. The whole ordeal made the local news, and not in a flattering way. "She's listing the house." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Well, bless her heart. For the next few weeks, the neighborhood transformed. With Karen gone, people seemed lighter, more willing to wave, to chat, to breathe. The HOA stopped issuing frivolous warnings about lawn height or mailbox paint. Kids rode their bikes without fear of a sudden citation. The air felt less managed. As for the Jello, well, it took a while to clean. Sergio came back with heat pumps and biodegradable solvents, and we drained the pool like we were defusing a bomb. Surprisingly, it held up. No damage. In fact, I think the liner protected it better than a winter tarp ever had. Afterward, I filled it with fresh water, crystal clear and peaceful again. Just in time for summer. One afternoon, I heard a knock at the back gate. It was Lila from next door, the little girl who'd been fascinated by the pool during the wedding. She held a towel and water wings. "Mom said I could ask if I can swim," she said, hopeful. I smiled. "Of course. Pool's open." She beamed, ran back to get her floaties. From the porch, I watched as she cannonballed into the water, sending ripples across the surface. No more threats. No more clipboards. Just laughter echoing through the neighborhood again. And maybe that was the sweetest part. Not the revenge, not the internet fame, not even the strawberry triumph, but the return to something simple. Something human. That pool, once a battleground, was mine again. But more than that, it was ours.